Hello and welcome to today's webinar on BISAC Subject Codes, our 2020 edition, delivered by Connie Harbison, Baker and Taylor, who's chair of our BISAC Subject Codes Committee. I'm Brian O'Leary, Executive Director of the Book Industry Study Group, and we're happy to have you here today. Connie's prepared a presentation that will address both primarily focus on the updates that we're planning for 2020, which will be available shortly. We're just proofing the list this week. But beyond that, she's also included some information about how BISAC works, how you can be involved, and some best practices for using the subject codes. Connie, thank you for doing this today, and I look forward to hearing the content of what we're planning to do in the coming update.
Oh, thank you, Brian. And thanks everyone for joining today. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So as Brian said, today we'll be talking about mostly about the 2020 edition of BISAC. Our agenda for today is I'll talk a little bit about the BISAC Subject Committee. I'll talk a little bit about just general things about a new edition, what the elements are when it comes out. Then we'll look at some of the highlights from the 2020 edition. I'll give you a few hints for assigning headings, and we'll go over what to do if you want to request a new heading, how you should do that. So the BISAC Subject Committee is a volunteer committee comprised of members and participants from all of these groups. We pretty much have at least one person from each of these groups as an active participant on the committee. And they come from all different backgrounds, all different positions within their company. Overall, the BISAC Subject Codes Committee, we maintain the BISAC subject headings, merchandising themes, and regional themes, and we provide guidance on the implementation and use of those standards. And if anyone who's interested in joining the committee, you can join if you're employed by a BISG member company. And if you want to join but your company's not a BISG member, you can contact Brian O'Leary to become a member. And we always welcome new members. We always, welcome new feedback. Some of the value of being a committee member is that you can drive discussions on changes you think are of value in the industry. For example, years ago, we had a group of Christian publishers who wanted to make some changes to religion and Bibles, and we made quite a number of changes based on their feedback. We had a participant who came to the meeting, she brought mock-ups, etc. You can share and hear real use cases to help the committee make better informed decisions. Often when we're talking about a new heading, people might share what their company's coming out with, new books they're coming out with, books they're having a problem finding the right heading for, and we'll talk that through. Or you can just bring expertise on a subject matter in which your company specializes. If you work for a medical company, a medical publisher, or a law publisher, we're always looking for experts in those fields. So we are on the 2020 version. As Brian said, that will be ready shortly, hopefully this week. And it's about our 25th edition or 26th edition. And so for each new edition, we make minor revisions to each section on an ongoing basis, and that's based on need and any incoming requests we have. And then we make major revisions to each section on a cyclical basis. So we might say, oh, we looked at religion 5 years ago, we need to overhaul it again, or look to see if things have changed, if what's new in that area, and what is maybe something that a heading no one's using that we may want to take out. And new versions of the list are released on an annual basis, generally in the fall. So this edition will definitely be released before the 21st. So the timeline of a new edition, we're basically here in October to August, and this is when the committee meets to discuss additions and changes for the edition. So we've already been meeting, we decided what we want to do for the 2021 edition. In August, the edition is closed by the committee. So for that particular edition, we're not going to make any more adds or changes. And then usually around September, October, we'll draft the proposal for the edition of all the adds and changes and deletes. And then that proposal is circulated to General BISG for comments and approval. And then around October, November, that proposal is circulated to the BISG Board of Directors for final approval. So that happened a little late this year, and I believe it was just approved on the 10th, Thursday. So then in December, the edition is released by BISG. The 2020 edition, in accordance with that timeline, we closed it in August. This is the 26th edition of the BISAC subjects, and it will be released in December. And if you're looking online for the BISAC subjects, this is not a downloadable edition. This is just a listing of the BISAC subjects. And that would be, you can go to the BISG website and go to the BISAC codes link. When you order, or if you are a member, a BISG member, and you get the BISAC subject codes, you will get, we call it a package, and it's basically a zip file of an Excel version and a Word version of the document. And the Word version includes all the cross-references where those are not included in the Excel version. So the elements of a new edition are the literal changes, inactivations, and the new headings. And I'm going to go through, for those of you who are less familiar with BISAC, I'm going to go through each of those things briefly, just so you have an idea of what they mean. Literal changes are made. We'll make literal changes to update a literal to a more current or common term. And we'll see a little bit about that, what we did for the 2020 edition in a little bit. And we might update a literal to expand the scope of a heading. We might update a literal to clarify a heading. Or we'll organize like headings into hierarchical trees. And if you're unfamiliar with a tree, this is basically what a tree would look like. There'd be a top level, which is the main topic. And that would be something like fiction or comics and graphic novels or pets. And there'll be a second level, and that might be something like general or something more specific. And then it goes down, it could go down to a third level where you get even more specific. This would be each top level, each level 2, or has a general, and then each level 3 starts with a general and then has more specific things. And it could, the most a BISAC will drill down is 4 headings. So in this case, in where you have 4 headings, you'd start with level 4 would be general, and then it would drill down more specific. So here's an example of a tree in fiction. This is the fiction, mystery, and detective tree. And first we drill down in mystery and detective to cozy. And then we can even drill down within COSI to find something more specific like cats and dogs. And there's about 3 other subcategories within COSI, so you can get pretty specific there. And you always, when you're assigning a subject, you always want to drill down. If there's a tree, you always want to drill down to the most specific branch. So for 2020, here's a new tree that we made. We had all these sports and recreation headings, racket sports, racquetball, squash, table tennis, and tennis. And we took those and we created a tree for racket sports, and we moved all of those headings into the racket sports tree. So now if you were looking for one of those headings, you would start with racket sports and then look for something more specific. Sometimes we might, if we change a literal, we might reduce the scope of something a little bit. So an example of one that we did for this 2020 edition is motorsports. So we had the edition, or we had the heading sports and recreation motorsports, and we decided we were going to make that a tree. So what we did was we started with sports and recreations motorsports general. That was the literal change for 028000. So if you have a book like this, like snowmobile racing, you can leave it under the general heading. And then we added a heading for automobile racing. So now if you wanted to, you can take all your books out of motorsports general and put them into automobile racing so that they can be found easier. And we also added motorcycle racing. I think I got my slides mixed up, but so motorcycle racing, you can take all your titles from general about motorcycle racing and put them into the motorsports motorcycle racing tree. Sometimes for scope reduction, in this case, if you leave all of these books under motorsports general because you just don't have the manpower to move them, then they're still correct. The heading could just be better. It can be more specific. But sometimes we might change a literal, so if you leave titles in there, it'll just be wrong. I remember we used to have a heading in cooking for vegetarian and vegan, and we decided to split those up. So when we moved vegan into its own heading, so we're now cooking vegetarian and cooking vegan, then all the books that were remaining in the vegetarian heading that were about veganism had to be moved, because once those two headings split, some titles were just wrong in the older heading. Another aspect of a new edition is inactive codes. We will take codes, we'll look at counts from different databases and see if people are using that code, if they're using it correctly, if it's redundant with something. And if we find that it's not really being used, we will inactivate it. So if you go to the BISG website again, there's an appendix of inactivated codes, and this is all the codes since the beginning of BISAC that have been inactivated. And to use that list, it looks like this, and this is included it's included in the back, the end of the Word version, and then there's a tab on it on the Excel version with this list. So first you have the inactivated code and literal. Then you have the last version that the code was active. And finally, the replacement code. Sometimes it'll be a one-to-one. Sometimes there'll be a choice of 2 that might be appropriate. Sometimes it could be a whole tree that's appropriate. So we try to be as specific as we can to make it easier for you guys to move your titles, but sometimes we're not really sure, what the best place is for the title to be moved. So for the 2020 edition, we have 155 new headings. In addition, we have 12 cross-reference additions. We have 123 literal changes to coded headings. And in addition, we added 13, we made 13 cross-reference changes. And luckily, we only had 2 inactivations and deleted 3 cross-references. You don't have to do anything when we change or delete cross-references. Those are to help you. So you probably don't store them in your database. So what was added for the 2020 edition? This is the counts of the headings added. As you can see, a tremendous amount were added in fiction. We added at least 1 new heading to 23 sections, and 62% of those new headings we added were to fiction. And when I go through the highlights of the edition, you'll see why. The next highest was young adult fiction. And for the 2020 edition, the literal changes, we changed a literal in 25 sections. So, at least 1 literal in 25 sections. 21% of those changes were in fiction. That section had the most changes. And 20% of those changes were in sports and recreation. And that was because we treed a lot of headings in sports and recreation. So today we'll look at the highlights of the new edition, and those are mostly the list-wide literal changes. This is one of the reasons why there were so many literal changes this edition. And then we'll look at some of the specific sections that had a lot of changes, including sports and recreation, young adult fiction, business and economics, science, and fiction. So the list-wide literal changes. About 71 literal changes were done to update verbiage in a literal that was used for different communities of people. So for LGBT, in 38 headings, we changed that to LGBTQ+, and that was also changed in a number of cross-references. For African American, we changed that in 19 headings to African American and Black. For Native American, sometimes it's Native American and Aboriginal. We changed that to either, in some headings, Indigenous, in some headings, Indigenous Peoples of the Americas. And we changed that in 11 headings. And then we changed Hispanic American to Hispanic and Latino in 3 headings. And, we've made so many changes for each of these because we want it to be consistent. We want the list to be consistent, so we don't want to leave, half of the literals that contain LGBT with that, and then take the other half and change it to LGBTQ+. We try to go through the whole entire list to maintain consistency within every section. So as I mentioned, in sports and recreation, we created quite a number of trees. We created a tree for animal sports, martial arts, motorsports, racket sports, water sports, and winter sports. And we moved 25 existing headings into one of these trees. And we added 7 new headings in sports and recreation, 6 of which were in one of these above trees. So our animal sports tree. Because this was a new tree that didn't exist in sports and recreation, we had to create the top level heading, which was general. And then the other headings we moved into animal sports. That would be all of these: dog racing, equestrian, horse racing, polo, and rodeos. So that way, if you're looking for the heading, you would start with animal sports and drill down. We made a small martial arts tree. So we have martial arts general, and then we added the heading for karate. And that was, we realized that there are a lot of martial arts, and as we see more books, as we perhaps see more books grow in the martial arts general tree, we might break those out into another kind of martial art. And I've already talked about the motorsports tree. We took motorsports and made that general. And then we added automobile racing and motorcycle racing. And we also looked a little already at the racket sports tree. And the racket sports tree had no new headings. All of those headings were moved from an existing heading. So it will retain the code. Now it just is within a racket sports tree. We created a water sports tree. The new heading added here was rowing. And then all of these headings were moved from, the literal was just changed. So they were, again, they're retaining their code. And the last tree we changed was winter sports, where we added curling. And all of these headings already existed, and the literal was just changed on them. The next section we're going to look at is young adult fiction. And there were a bunch of headings we added in young adult fiction at the request of one of our Christian publishers. We added clean and nonviolent. And there was some controversy about that heading, about adding that heading, but we have, BISAC is used by a large community of publishers, and they all have different needs. And this particular community really needed this heading, and so it met the needs of one segment of the publishing industry. We also added comics and graphic novels, diversity and multicultural, fantasy, romance, own voices, and people and places, United States, Middle Eastern, and Arab American. And just a note on own voices, that's a heading that we added in fiction and young adult fiction. And that heading is intended for works where the main characters are from a marginalized minority or underrepresented group, and where the author is a member of the group being written about. So that's the only time that that heading should be used. Also in young adult fiction, we expanded thrillers and suspense. So this heading was just thrillers and suspense. We made it general, and we added all these headings to young adult fiction, so people could better classify their young adult fiction thrillers. The next section we'll look at is business and economics. These are the new headings that we added: careers, interviewing, economics, social and behavioral, freelance and self-employment, logistics and supply chain, and workplace harassment and discrimination. We're also going to look at this section a little more in the 2021 edition. When we started the edition, it was October of 2019, and of March of 2020, kind of how people work started changing a little bit, and we so we're going to look at this section again in for 2021 edition, as there's like kind of new work environment. People are working from home more. People are working virtually, and it depends on what kind of books we start seeing. So if we start seeing a lot of books on working from home and how to best work from home, how to manage people from home, you may start seeing those kinds of headings in the next edition. A new tree we added was for labor. This was previously business and economics labor. And if you had books on like a labor union, this is where it was supposed to go in business and economics labor. We added 2 headings here, labor unions and labor wages and compensation. So you could take your books on labor unions and move them into the new labor unions heading. We worked a lot on the science section. We looked closely at space science. We created a tree for space science. We had these headings and we moved them to create the tree, general astronomy and cosmology. But then in addition, we added 3 headings under the tree, the space science tree. So now you also have planetary, space exploration, and stellar and solar. And for fiction, we added a lot of new headings to fiction, as you saw on the earlier slide. Some of the new headings we added were Buddhist, disability and special needs, multiple timelines, Muslim, own voices, and romance rock stars. And then we created a new section in fiction in which we added 90 new headings. We added this, the trees for fiction world literature. This kind of fell out of a discussion that we were having on fiction literary and fiction classics, and how we could break up some of those sections. If there's something better, that if we could tree those to anything better. Just if there was something that we could, fiction literary can be somewhat subjective. We're looking at a way, if there was some way we could classify those books that was less subjective. So after many meetings, we came up with this fiction world literature tree. And the subjects beginning with fiction world literature, these are intended for books written by authors that are commonly identified as being from the country or region specified. They are not meant to indicate the setting or language of a book. For example, say you have titles by Jose Saramago, and you can use on that fiction world literature Portugal, because that would be used for works by authors from Portugal and not for authors from any other Portuguese-speaking country, regardless of the language or setting of the book. So we put these instructions. If you have the word edition of BISAC, if you look at the beginning, at the introduction, there's kind of a little write-up on a little usage note on each section, and we've included in those usage notes how to use this this new section. So if you forgot, how to use it, check in the usage notes. And if you have like a multinational author that's not associated with the country in which they were born, you can use your discretion in deciding which location that author might be most commonly identified with. That's not saying you have to use one of these headings, but if it was appropriate for your title. So here's an example of the world literature tree. This is England. And we have the general, and it's broken down by time periods. And we do have quite a lot of countries. As I said, we have 93 headings, although some, like England, have quite a number of headings. So we may not have every single country there is represented. We tried to, represent as much as we could. But if there's just not, if there's a very small country that we may not have included, perhaps there's just not, the counts aren't there, over 100 books, but from authors from that country. And then some of the miscellaneous new headings. These are headings that were added. They're requests received by users, either within the committee or users, people who put suggestions in our suggestion form. The new headings include computers, forensics, cooking, equipment and utensils, juvenile fiction, spies and spying, medical, telemedicine, and technology and engineering, pharmaceutical. And one of the more important literal changes we made, we saw a lot of books that were coming out on this one topic, the pandemic. And we talked about, there's so many books coming out right now. We talked about whether we needed to add a heading on pandemics. But as we looked through the list, we found that health and fitness diseases contagious covered these titles, though it didn't include the term pandemics. So we just made a tiny literal change to this heading to say includes pandemics. So now if you have someone looking for books on pandemics, you're trying to classify your own books on pandemics, this is the heading that you would use. And now if you searched up pandemics in the list, you would now get this heading. Those are pretty much the biggest highlights from the new edition. I'm hoping that you guys are seeing the right slide, because looks like there's
the one we're seeing is right now is, should I use multiple headings?
Oh, good, great. I'm looking at my sharing corner, and it's showing the wrong slide. So good. I'm glad everything's okay. So we get this question a lot: should I use multiple headings? And the short answer is yes. Whenever it's applicable to your titles, you should use multiple headings. Sometimes a book doesn't have a single correct subject. Sometimes different customers might approach your titles from different angles. Sometimes you want to cover all aspects of a title and need multiple headings to do so. The one thing that you don't have to do, though, is to add both a general and specific heading from the same tree. So if you have pets, dogs, general, and pets, dogs, training, you don't need the pets, dog, general on that title, just the training. Another example is, say you have a book on Walt Disney World. You can give that heading, you can give that title 2 headings within the same section. So that may get 2 travel headings, travel, special interest, amusement and theme parks, and travel United States South Atlantic. And that's appropriate to give those 2 headings. Or you can give a book 2 headings from different sections. Say you have a book about Ted Bundy. You can give that true crime, murder, serial killers, and biography and autobiography, criminals and outlaws. Or if you have a book of political speeches by Hillary Clinton, you can give that literary collections, speeches, and political science, women in politics. So again, you just want to give the codes that are most applicable and that people will be able to find your book under. The total number you can give it really depends on the structure of your database and your data recipient's database. So the limitation of the codes is not imposed by Onyx. You can send in Onyx, you can send as many as you want. But it is reasonable for a book to only have a single topic, though it's a little unusual for it to have more than 3 BISACs. But say you have a book that's about learning how to knit. It's perfectly fine to just have crafts and hobbies, needlework, knitting. There's no reason to put anything additional on that title. Some of the best practices for assigning BISAC codes, we want to assign them based on the book's content, not on the merchandising plans of the publisher. We want to assign the most precise subject, and usually you would assign them in order of importance. So if they look to be equally important, and whatever one you as a publisher feel is more important, because it's possible that a data recipient can only take one BISAC. And just remember that the most specific BISAC is always the best one. We talked a little bit about that the committee received suggestions for headings from people outside of the committee. So if you have a suggestion for a heading that you want to see added, you can submit that suggestion to the submitting committee, and we will talk about it. We talk about all requests. We discuss them and we consider them. However, sometimes the request is a little too vague for us to discuss, and people might, I'm going to go over in a little bit how to fill out the form, but sometimes people don't always fill it out correctly, and it makes it more difficult for us to determine what's wanted. So if you want to request a new heading, I would suggest to be very clear in doing so. When you submit your suggestion, you want to consider whether the heading could be applied to at least 100 unique ISBNs. You want to consider whether it would be used by all publishing companies, not just yours. And you should think about whether your suggestion is just way too narrow or way too broad. Usually, on occasion, we've gotten suggestions to add a top level section, and the only time I can remember doing it, well, besides the young adults, was we had a group of people from art publishers come in and talk about adding a design heading They came to us, they talked, they came to meetings, they talked about it in person. And it was a number of different publishers, saying they wanted this top level heading. So if that's the case, then, you can request a top level heading and we can talk about it. But if you want to do that, it's got to be supported by research and you have to have support from other publishers. You also want to look through the list to see if a comparable heading already exists. Say you're looking for a heading on mainstreaming and education. We already have education, inclusive education. This kind of goes back to our pandemics example as well. We've talked about adding a heading for pandemics, but we already had the heading on contagious diseases. So that worked for all those books. Where do you go to submit a suggestion? The BISG website has a form for suggestions. I'm going to try to go into it and hopefully not throw everything off. So if you go on BISG's website and it says can't find the code you're looking for after reviewing all the pages below, you can click on this link and you have the suggestion form. And as I said, you want to fill this out as thoroughly as you can.
Connie, it looks like the GoToWebinar is prioritizing the presentation and not showing the form itself.
Oh, okay, sorry. See if I can. I'm not going to hold you up to look for that, but if you go to the BISG website and you look at, you go to the BISAC section, right before the codes, the list of codes start, there's, as I said, there's a paragraph that says, if you want to add something, click on this form. And you would click on that form and the what it will ask you for, it will ask you for what top level you're looking for, what something more specific you're looking for within that top level, and it'll ask you for examples.
And Connie, if anyone on the call has trouble finding that, they can write to us at info@bisg.org and we'll direct them.
Thank you, Brian. I'm sorry for that.
It's okay.
So if you're providing examples for a heading, you want to include examples from multiple authors, from multiple publishers, and from more current titles, not titles that have been out of print for forever. So I just wanted to go over a couple of good requests and requests that need some improvement, just in case you are interested in adding a new heading or suggesting a new heading. So first we have someone requesting romance rock stars, and they put the high level section they want is fiction, and their subheading request, they want it under in the romance tree, rock stars. They put all 10 examples they filled out, all different authors, and they put an explanation of why they want that heading and why they think it's a good ad. So when we went to talk about this, we were like, yeah, there are a lot of examples, and this particular heading ended up being added to the 2020 edition. Another example is art, Canadian Indigenous. This was a good example. They had all of the examples, an explanation, and plus they sent somebody from, I believe this was from BookNet Canada, they sent somebody to talk about it as well. So that was very helpful in deciding whether we were going to add this heading or not. Some requests that could be better and that we had a really difficult time talking about. This first one, someone said he wanted it under fiction. The subheading request, a Navy corpsman's brutal diary. The examples are all by the requester. Corpsman, the corpsman, Navy corpsman, US Navy corpsman. So we were a little confused as to what this person was asking for. And if we didn't have, if this book was actually about something that we already had a heading for. So this request ended up being one that we didn't really address for very long because we didn't know exactly what this person was asking for. Another not so good request is this request in business and economics. The subheading request and the examples are all question marks. And they say they need a heading for the subject of investing. But we have, we have a tree on investments and securities. So we weren't really sure what different this person was looking for, that, what exactly we did not have already that that this person was looking for. Perhaps if they put some examples and their subheading request, we would have been able to discuss it in more detail. So that's about all that I have for today. And does anyone have any questions on the new edition or anything else? If you can't think of one now, there's my contact information. Please feel free to email me.
So Connie, we have a few questions, and we may get some others as we go forward in the next 12 or 15 minutes. One question, just a quick one from Rachel, asking if the version that we publish includes translations, and I think you can explain that it's only in the English language that we publish the BISAC subject codes.
Yes.
Joshua Talent was nice enough at the beginning of the webinar to wish you luck and hope that it went well.
Thank you.
And he later asked a question with respect to the world literature changes.
Yes.
He's just wondering about how we think about it relative to Onyx, because Onyx has a contributor place composite that allows publishers to identify where an author's from. What's the thinking with respect to world literature? Because typically subject codes are used differently from what might be declared in Onyx.
It could happen that, they are exactly the same, but, in the world literature, it gives you a little, you have more information as well. You have the time period. So, I guess you can make it a little more specific if you were to use one of those headings as a subject.
Okay, and a question from Alan. Is there a mechanism to request additions or changes to the regional codes, which are somewhat less?
Yes, we actually, which I didn't mention, the new edition has a couple changes to the merchandising codes and the regional codes. The merchandising codes, the changes, one of the changes in line with all the literal changes in the edition is to change, I think there was topical LGBT. We changed that to LGBTQ+. And I believe we added an own voices in topical as a merchandising theme as well. And for regional themes, we did add one regional value, which Alan might be the person who requested it. It's it was a Canadian region, and we just added that one. That was the request I'd gotten. It's the only request I've gotten in a long time. So we hadn't made changes in a long time, but if there's something there that you need, if you're using those codes and you need, a change, you need something new, can basically send in the form and, put your comments down that you need the regional codes, or you can just email me and say, tell me you need the regional code.
Okay, thanks. That's a good way to use the form and still get the information in. I think the other thing you could suggest too is that if you're interested, to reach out to you and you could schedule time in an upcoming meeting and have a conversation about it.
Absolutely, and for things like the regional codes, they really, it's not that they are a huge talking topic, so they don't take up tons of a meeting. So we do have, normally just would have time to just, talk about that.
Good. We've got a couple questions that are probably a little bit you and a little bit me. One is from Rachel, but a different Rachel. Will we be sending out a list of the 2020 BISAC headings to webinar attendees before official publication? And the answer is no, but I think it has two parts. The first part is it's not done yet. I mean, you're still proofing it.
Right.
But the second piece is that the subject code headings themselves are a benefit of membership in BISG. You get it for free if you're part of BISG right now. Otherwise, access to the subject codes is limited to either buying the subject code list for download or accessing it on the BISG website. We won't be updating the website until we have the 2020 the proved BISAC list sometime this week, and then we'll turn to updating the website as well as the product listing, and then we'll make an announcement about that. But it means that we won't be sending anything out between now and when it's made publicly available next week or in the next week. The second question, and it's kind of related, but is from Julia, asking, do we have plans to create a searchable interactive list of BISAC subjects similar to what's available for BIC and THEMA? I think BIC is fairly outdated. It hasn't been updated, I think, now in 6 years, but THEMA does have a current listing on the editor website. That may be entirely mine, because that's not so much the code list, but how it's presented.
Just a suggestion, if you have, if you have it in, if you're a BISG member and you have the codes list in Excel or in Word, it's easy to just search up, search for whatever keyword you might be looking for in the same kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, there are two problems here, and I have only a partial answer for BISG. Part of it is that if you search on the BISG website, which is I think the interface that Julia is probably looking at, you're going to get results that are relevant, that are both drawn from BISAC as well as from other parts of the data in the website. And this is something that came up during our website review that was conducted by Linda Secondary and Tricia Oken earlier this year and reported on in the fall. People are looking for that kind of functionality. It's really a business model decision for us because, as I said a moment ago, the provision of access to the BISAC subject codes is a benefit of membership in BISG. Otherwise, you have to pay for it. The website itself, we featured the entire code list largely as a service to independent hybrid publishers who don't have access and are not going to buy the subject code list, and they don't have a system that includes it. So like a Firebrand Technologies title management system that would include access to code lists that you would normally then rent or if your BISG member already have access to. So we have to make a decision if we're going to increase the functionality that's available on the web. We're really what you're really asking for is for us to give up the business model on BISAC. And I'm not saying no, but that's not a decision I can make lightly. Connie, we have a couple minutes left. Maybe if you're in a position to do so, to talk about the major updates you have on the horizon for 2021, the categories that you're looking at.
Oh, sure. So some of the sections that we are targeting to, as I said, we're going to look at business and economics again, just because the business world is changing so rapidly. We're going to be looking at history, education, and we're going to be looking at education partially for the same reasons, to see what kind of books are coming out more on virtual education, online education, online, things like that, like to see if there's books coming out on the way kids are learning or have been learning in the past 9 months. And so we're going to look at that section. We're going to look at house and home, and we're going to look at the juvenile sections. We're going to look at fiction and nonfiction just as an overall, as overall sections. We've added or changed a number of headings in those sections over the years, but it's been a while since we've looked at the section as a section as a whole. And we're going to be looking at religion, the religion section. Again, it's been quite a long time since we've looked at that section as a whole. So that's what will be on the horizon for the 2021 edition, which, as I said, we just started talking about that in October.
And that's a good checklist for people who have an interest in those areas, that this is a good year to get involved, but you're also taking things over the transom as people create suggestions and bring them to the committee.
And I usually mention this in these webinars, but I did take it out for this one. We do meet once a month. We meet for 3 hours, usually on a Thursday. And lately we had been meeting in person in New York, but now lately we've just been meeting via Zoom. So if you're interested, if you are a member, you're interested in joining a meeting, we may have one this week on Wednesday, but if not, then we'll have one. It'll be the third Thursday in January.
Great, thank you, Connie. A question from Anna that she is probably common for a lot of folks, that she has several BISAC suggestions that she'd like to propose. Is it better to fill out a form, wait for feedback, and then submit another, or do you do multiple forms, or should she just plan to come to a committee?
She can, if whatever way is fine. If she has a lot of, if they're all suggestions from all different areas, then she can just, then she could fill out a form for each one. If they're all from, say, fiction or some other area, in the comments of the form, she can put those, put each heading you're looking for. I think the examples list takes up to 10. So if you put a few examples for each heading you're looking for, and of course, you're welcome to come to a meeting. And if you came to a meeting, I'd make it a point to talk about what you were proposing. Coming to a meeting allows you to, talk about to the committee what you want. If the committee says something, well, we already have this, or we want, we don't want it, whatever, it gives you the position to defend the heading, and if you feel very strongly about it, to fight for that heading. So while I have the form, and I want examples, there's really no rule in how to fill it out, or whether you just want to come to the meeting.
If it would be okay, I know normally we wrap up just now at the hour, but I was wondering if I could ask you a couple of other questions that have come in that might be, thanks. I didn't want to take your time unattributed. Jackie was just asking about whether or not within the Subject Codes Committee they've discussed any concerns about conflicts between world literature and other codes. So she mentions fiction classics and fiction world literature, England 19th century as an example, or Margaret Atwood being world literature Canada versus fiction literary. And is the debut of this world literature tree a precursor to a plan to remove classics or literature eventually?
I wish, but no. People like that heading, fiction literary, that, as I said, when I was kind of talking about that section, that's how the discussions started to, which eventually led to adding that section. Fiction classics, fiction literary, they're huge sections, but people like those headings. People like fiction literary, and every time I bring it up to get rid of it, the publishers are all like, no. So we don't really have any plan to get rid of either of those headings, but I can't say, and I especially can't say that now since the codes haven't even been released yet, but maybe down the road we see people using those codes, an uptick on people using those codes and less people using fiction classics. Maybe we would think about it, but that would be quite a number of years down the road. We have to give this world literature tree some legs first.
And I think that's more generally a good example of how things work within the Subject Codes Committee, is that you look at what's actually being used and try to make decisions based on that.
Right. What kinds of books are coming out? If there's a surge in some type of books, the publishers are usually aware of those types of things, and and then for those types of those headings that aren't being used, we'll look at, why is this not being used? Are there no books? Do people not know what it means? So we don't take it lightly when we're inactivating a code.
Mary was just asking, she first said thanks for all the great information that you provided, and she just was asking if you could repeat what should and should not be included in own voices as a new code.
Oh, sure. So the definition, let me just go back to that. The definition for own voices, I'm going to think of an example, but I can't think of what the title was. Somewhat recently, Oprah had a title, which she had chose a title for her book club, and I think it was about Hispanic and Latinos, and the author was.
Are you thinking of American Dirt?
Yes, thank you. The author was not of that ethnicity, so people criticized that that book because the author, it wasn't her, I guess, own voice that was writing that book. And I'm sorry, I'm like flipping through papers trying to.
No, it's okay. I know I took you out of
papers as I'm talking. So that's kind of where the discussion came from. So the definition that we are using for that is it intended for works where the main characters are from a marginalized, minority, or underrepresented group, and where the author is a member of the group being written about. So it's the author's, the author relates to the group that he or she is writing about.
Thank you. That's really helpful. The last question I just wanted to touch base before we sign off is Liz Riba's just asking when will the website show the updated BISAC codes, and we're going to aim for a week from today. We have to get it right, and so we're going through the proofing process right now. And once that work is done, then we have to do the work to update the 54 web pages that are for each of the subject categories, as well as a handful of other product pages that are related to BISAC, and that takes several days. So we're aiming for the start of next week, which would be the 21st. Connie, thank you very much both for doing this webinar today and bringing so much information to the community about what we changed in 2020, as well as how to make good use and make BISAC work for everybody. But also thank you for sticking around for a few minutes and answering a couple more questions on our behalf. A recording will be sent to everybody tomorrow at about this time, and it'll be posted on the BISG website on the same schedule. Thanks again, Connie.
Thank you, Brian. And again, if anyone has any questions, please just feel free to email them to me, and you know, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Everyone have a nice holiday.
Okay, you too. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.